You know, I was looking it up, and I have read 6 Brandon Sanderson books and 5 of his novellas. Not too shabby. Hello and welcome back to Shelf Centered. Thank you so much for stopping by. Just wanted to jump into a quick update. We're doing a Stormlight read along this year to kind of get up to speed with the 5th book that should be coming out next year. I also wanted to give an update just on the state of the Sanderson, that end of the year post that Brandon Sanderson always does, to kind of update his fans on everything that's going on in his writing world, which is highly appreciated. And I know there's some authors like certain George R. R. Martin that probably will never give a real solid update like Brandon does, but it is appreciated mostly when it can be followed up upon and we can trust that it'll happen. So, and Brandon Sanderson has been anything but not only forthcoming, but also not only does he make his deadlines, a lot of times he gets ahead of his deadlines. It's insane. He must be a publisher's dream. He's definitely a reader's dream. As far as the update on my reading progress, you can tell I'm serious because the dust jacket's off. We're serious. We are so close in the final pages. It's hard at this point. It's been hard enough to do anything while reading, towards the front, while reading this book, to do anything else anyway, but especially right now. We're in the last little bit here. Things are just converging. All kinds of things are happening. It is hard to film this video. It's hard to do anything but read this book, and that's such a good sign. I cannot wait, and it's going to be a hard time holding myself off because for our read along, we're doing 1 book per quarter, which means I'm technically not supposed to start Words of Radiance until April. So so I can read some things in between. Anyway, I always do that, but at least this will keep me honest for somewhat. So the goal with that is, as you may or may not know, so 1 per quarter, and then potentially kind of being ready at least for next year. Now, there's been kind of some talk anyway, but I'll get into the Sanderson, state of the Sanderson, because he kind of gives us, this is the reason why I think we can do a read along at this point. It might get delayed a little bit, every year. I've been following the state of the Sanderson for, well, some time now, since pretty much when I got this baby, which is the advanced reading copy that I got back in 2010. So this sucker had a lot of, you can see here, acknowledgments, TK, every kind of thing. So when I first read it, and I'm doing a reread right now, there really wasn't a lot of content. There were a couple of the maps, but then you'd come to, so you can see I didn't really have a map to go on, just kind of jumped right into the prelude. But anyway, this was a fun way to do it because now I get to show it every chance I get. Anyway, so it's been really fun going through that again. But I've been following the state of the Sanderson. I remember when I first read this, Sanderson was in the middle of finishing up the Wheel of Time, and at the time after finishing Way of Kings, I was like, stop this Wheel of Time nonsense. Just let him do his thing, because I was so into the Way of Kings and the Stormlight Archive at that point. But turns out I'm glad we can kind of get the best of both worlds now that I've finished the Wheel of Time, and I'm glad to have a nice, satisfactory ending to that. The state of the Sanderson, I guess first reading it, you're kind of like, he seems to kind of be dreading getting into a new Stormlight Archive book, and you can hear that in the fact that he goes, it feels really soon to be gearing up for the daunting task of writing another Stormlight book. So you're kind of like, oh, great, he's not looking forward to it. But I can believe it. I know there's so much to the world. This is his most detailed, most just ridiculous project that he even himself has admitted that he didn't even know if it was a possibility to get it out there. and aren't we glad that he has? And we also know that he started the prologue already over the holidays, so maybe even before this year started, he's already on it, and he even had to kind of do some updates and some reading kind of sprints or writing sprints for him to finish up other books he was going on. So just kind of briefly wanted to get into my own kind of updates, what stood out to me as important that I'm kind of tracking. The Cytoverse, I do have the first book in that. What is it? I forget what it is. I might be able to find it in editing. So that one, but I haven't really followed along with it too closely by actually reading it. So I haven't quite gotten there, but it is one that I am definitely going to be reading at some point. He kind of gives an update, just his whole year. He's kind of given that he wrote The Lost Metal. That's the last in the Wax and Wane series of Mistborn books, which I understand, and I haven't read. The Mistborn is one that I'm sorely lacking on in Sanderson's backlog here. I've read The Arithmetist. I've read Warbreaker, Elantris. I read some of the Legion. I've read some of the Alcatraz. I've read Steelheart. So I've dabbled in a lot, but Mistborn, his main thing, I haven't even touched. Anyway, so, but I do follow it closely because I know I will touch it. I will read it soon, and soon enough. And because I am looking forward to that, especially the whole concept. It's really cool to have a fantasy kind of phase 1 in Mistborn, and then I believe Wax and Wane is kind of more of a Western, and correct me if I'm wrong, and then he even has a sci-fi kind of version eventually, maybe as a modern version. Anyway, very cool. I really like that. He does talk about writing 3 novellas in the Cytoverse, I think, with other authors. He talks throughout his stay of the Sanderson about another couple projects with other people. This is where I get, I would hate for Brandon Sanderson to become, the fantasy James Patterson, first of all. But I do like the fact that he kind of couches all this writing with other authors to be look, this lets me focus on the things that you guys like the most, which is, Stormlight and Mistborn, and then I can kind of get out all these other fun things that I want that is part of how he loves the craft of writing. So I can't blame him for it. I do feel that my gut reaction is a little hesitant, not that I can have anything to say about it, but I am just kind of oh, are we really going down this road already? It makes sense. It definitely makes sense money-wise. That, and I'll get into kind of that, those concerns later. There's an update on Mainframe, which is his what he talks about is his audio kind of audiobook company, and doing kind of a lot of exclusive audio stuff through that. So, which is interesting. I love audiobooks. So I'm really glad for the focus on that, and clearly, I don't know, and maybe this is just a sign of that's where the market is going. It's audiobooks are a huge thing and becoming bigger and bigger. I remember there was a time in my life where I remember kind of tracking it, and it would be I would read about 40 or 50 books to maybe 5 to 10 audiobooks, and now it's easily completely switched, and I am almost predominantly reading an audiobook. Well, I always have a book going, but finishing is on audiobook. I can finish books so much easier and quicker, and that's just how it is. So that's it. The one, he gets into part 3 of the State of the Sanderson, the primary projects. And I know you can read this if you want, obviously, and I'm going to link to that below. But I just feel not a lot of people are talking about it on BookTube. Maybe there's a reason for that. But the primary projects and the secondary projects are kind of where I come to the table here. So the Stormlight Archive, he's talking about, okay, we're working on it this year. Dawn Shard, that the novella is supposed to be coming out on audio this year, and maybe another novella. when the Words of Radiance leatherbound Kickstarter comes out in the summer of 2023. So I would definitely mark your calendars to watch out for that, because as far as I can tell, those suckers sell out so fast, and I really have been kicking myself that I didn't jump on it when I could have. I easily could have and just didn't. And then the Cytoverse or Skyward, it literally says it right here, so there you go. I think I was right. That looks to be finishing up. The novellas are out. You got another, Defiant, looks to be getting close here. And then Mistborn. So it's like Stormlight, Skyward, and Mistborn are the key projects for Brandon Sanderson right now. I thought it was interesting that he wrote out his writing schedule is 1 to 5 p.m. in the afternoon and then 10 to 2 a.m. in the evening. That's quite an interesting schedule. And honestly, I mean, I know I follow a lot of like Steven Erikson, I think does a solid 4 hours a day, and then it's done. And so whether it's, a page or 1,000 words or whatever, fit into one page, because my tracking system didn't make any sense there. Anyway, and it got, Erickson to write his behemoths. So I don't know, that just seems like, okay, I get why he's able to get through so much. And I think one of them, as I understand it, is kind of the writing session, and one of them's revising. So again, it makes sense. He's able to kind of balance those two. The secondary projects is where I am very interested in, because that's pretty much where I've done most of my reading, other than Stormlight. All right, the secondary, let's see. Alcatraz series is the last book in that has been written. It looks like it will be coming out next year. That's interesting, and I'm excited to get my kids into that. I read the first one or two. Now that I'm thinking about it, I forget if I. But the first one, at least, it was good. It was entertaining. It's nothing to write home about, to be honest. It was fine, and I'm guessing because I'm not the audience, and that's probably the biggest reason. But he does kind of have that. Looks like those will be coming out about every month or two, starting in May of this year. So the Alcatraz books are getting reprinted, and so they're starting with those reprints with the first book in May, and then down. I can flash up the what that looks like, that schedule. The Dark One, and that's what I've been interested in, is the Dark One, and he also talks about the White Sand, but that is in the works. A second one, and he's working on it with Dan Wells. I really like Dan Wells. If you haven't checked out, the I'm Not a Serial Killer series, that is really, it's excellently done, well written, entertaining. Dan Wells, I think, does a really good job. And anyway, so that one's one. Again, I just kind of go, at least he's got a good author with it. I don't know the other authors that he teams up with very well, but I know Dan Wells is good, so that's at least heartening. White Sand, these are both the graphic novels, so Dark One and White Sand, that's why I grouped them together. The White Sand graphic novel omnibus should be coming in the near future, is as good as we've got here. I do want to read it. I have the Arcanum Unbounded, and it was fine, but it's just not a lot in there. I've heard mixed reviews on White Sand, so I kind of want to give my own 2 cents on that once I read that. He does give another update, because year after year he kind of does this update for Elantris, Warbreaker, and Rhythmatist. And he's kind of promised, like, hey, I've got ideas for sequels, but really nothing's going to happen. And he even kind of makes clear, look, I've been telling you I'm not going to do anything with those. I'm not even going to touch those until book 5 of the Stormlight Archive is done. And so that's at least not until next year at the very minimum, and we'll see if those even get more. And he probably has other ideas to do other things even that will spark his interest even before those. So who knows? One that I am interested in, the secondary project, is the Songs of the Dead with Peter Arulian. I've read, if you want a Wheel of Time-like book, if you're a fan, but aren't going to be too mad about too much being taken from the Wheel of Time. Then Peter Aurelian's The Unremembered was excellent. It was a really good book. It's really well told, but it is like a lot of similarities to the Wheel of Time. So you've been warned on that one. The Reckoners looks like he kind of just mentions, hey, we got a new book in that, Lux, and he wrote it with Stephen Michael Bowles. And again, this is one of those that just, anyway, I'm concerned. I just have concerns. It's fine. Okay. All right. I'll shut up. The original, then he talks about with Mary Robinette Kowal. And again, I know she's a well-known, great author, and so I'm not too concerned about that one. Anyway, so those are kind of the secondary projects. They're just, he's mentioned a bunch of these in the past, but they are secondary, and again, I prefer that. I want Stormlight. Obviously, if we could have that in the next, finished up all 10 of them in the next 6 years or whatever, that would be great. But it's not going to happen, and it's, the fact that we'll get them most likely in the next 10 or 11 is pretty insanely amazing. All right, then he goes into kind of television, video games, film updates. Just quickly, the Wheel of Time, obviously we know, and he kind of mentions, I don't agree with all the choices they're making. Include some content I find it objectionable. So, of course, but he's saying overall they're doing a great job. I think he has to say that. I'm sorry, but especially with George R. R. Martin, I think losing some credibility there with Game of Thrones, which again, you're between a rock and a hard place. I'm not going to fault an author too much for not just being honest there. I don't know. Maybe they do believe what they say, so I'm not going to... Okay, we'll shut up. All right. Mistborn, I like this. He says he's developing in a hands-on way a Mistborn feature film. Like, that's interesting, and I like that. He's written his own treatment for it, some of the actual scenes, and I'm like, hey, this is good. That's a good sign. Stormlight looks like it's got something going for it, and he's pretty sure it's going to happen into something, which makes sense. I would guess, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, this is probably one of his best-selling series, so it just makes sense that would be something that people are going to be jumping onto. And then he kind of hems and haws a little bit about some other stuff that's going on he can't really talk about, and a video game that might be announced this year. So he says, speculate about it. Let's do it. Okay, let me know. What do you think it's going to be? Mistborn, right? I mean, right? No. Steelheart could be one. The Reckoners could be one. Steelheart or Mistborn. Those are my two. I just don't know enough about Mistborn, as I said. It goes into, these are ones I'm less inclined to kind of be concerned about. Just a bunch of miniatures, some board games, playing cards and whatnot. So if you're interested in that, definitely check that out. Talks about the store and the Leatherbound updates, and that those are going to be updating. It seems like they're going to be harder and harder to get a hold of, but they will go in and out of stock, at least for the Way of Kings Leatherbound, so that's cool. Need to be better at checking. And then they apparently have restocked some Leatherbound books of a bunch of other stuff like Way of Kings, Mistborn, Well of Ascension, and Hero of Ages. So anyway, I'm not a salesman here for Mr. Sanderson, so feel free to check that out. Some translation projects is next. YouTube, I'm glad he's on YouTube, and he kind of is talking about, having his own con, his own YouTube channel. So he's got his own convention that he's kind of like, this makes it easier for me. Everyone can come to me instead of me going out to everybody else. And I'm sure with just everything schedule-wise, pandemic-wise, it's kind of a nicer, safer way to do things. And then YouTube, too, to be able to get closer to people and do signings and talk and answer questions while he's signing. So he can kind of kill two birds with one stone, and I appreciate that. Again, he's one of these super hands-on authors, as you well know, I'm sure. But I think the best that he gives us here is a projected schedule for what's going on. So fall 2021, he obviously had Skyward 3 came out, Cytonic I think is what it was. The original projection was spring 2022 for Alcatraz 6, and it looks like that's more like fall because they're re-releasing all, so that's September actually now instead of spring, and because they're really re-releasing all the rest of those. Fall 2022, Wax and Wane 4, that's the Lost Metal. And then 2023, Spring Summer, Skyward 4. What is that? Defiant, I think is what that one was. And then Fall 2023, Stormlight 5. And so, anyway, I'll throw it up here, but it looks like that hasn't really changed too much. The Legion, I do like the Legion series. Death and Faxes is coming out in June. And I think that's the biggest, really, other than Stormlight 5. Again, it's fall 2023, so my read-along is going to be a little bit ahead of schedule, but that's not too bad. And I'm sure there will be things that being released ahead of that, like a prologue and all that, to be able to kind of get into the spirit of things. This went a little longer than I thought it would. Would love it if you pressed liked, booped, liked, smushed, liked. Wow, that got weird fast. And subscribed if you haven't already. Hey, thank you so much. We'll see you later. Bye.